So this is part B. This is part B of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, Justice for the Baby Angel Geronimo editions. And the page 1 of today's Times, Friday the 10th of September, contains a meaningless item saying that Tories are trailing Labour with lowest backing since election, which is completely meaningless. Let's say this refers to the votes that may be cast at an election, that will not be cast in favor of anything that Boris Johnson fronts. I'm putting it that way. And what does it mean? It means nothing, no difference. It's no difference at all. So, continuing the theme of the justice for the baby angel Geronimo. Geronimo has been under attack, severe attack from Boris Johnson. And instead of stopping the attack, instead of condemning the attack, instead of demanding justice for Geronimo, Keir Starmer endorses the criminality aimed at Geronimo. So we don't recognize this as a significant item at all. And especially Keir Starmer, whom we evidentially find is the murderer, political murderer of the Labour Party. There is no substance in the slightest suggestion that Starmer is of any significance whatsoever. And there is a piece on the comment page of page 27 of the Times, which says, this is the awful truth about 9/11. The terrorists won. Now we shall go to that in just a minute. After noting this cartoon by Peter Brooks, which shows Priti Patel in the channel between France and England. And she's there to stop alleged migrants from crossing the channel from France to England. And she is looking with the telescope and the numbers of floating migrants dying floating. And she says, I see no problem. Now, that is the one aspect of the corrupt Darkland regime that Johnson fronts and Priti Patel inhabits. And what we are saying in the campaign for justice for Geronimo is strictly on the facts and strictly on the evidence that Geronimo has been targeted not only because of the inherent evil that is the mentality of the attackers. The inherent evil also extends into the politically, spiritually, morally dead Keir Starmer. Of all the centuries, let's say, now this is the Starmer in the Private Lie where he says, there is nothing to oppose. He says, hello, it's not easy being leader of the opposition, let me tell you. Take this week, for example. How can I do my job when there is absolutely nothing to oppose? So that is Private Lie admitting the Starmer is himself dead. Not only has he politically murdered the Labour Party, but he is himself dead. Politically, of course, because we are talking about politics, political evidence on the. And the editorial today, Labour Pains, in the Times, of course, the Times is not in any way a supporter of the Labour Party, but the fact that it doesn't support the Labour Party makes no difference whatsoever, as I said on the issue of the front page, saying that Labour is ahead a few points in the poll for the first time since the so-called election. And its heading, Labour Pains heading on page 29 of the Times today, Friday the 10th of September 2021. It reads, Keir Starmer's weak response to Boris Johnson's tax-raising gambit raises fresh questions about his leadership and highlights the challenge facing his party. Well, it says that until Keir Starmer can offer clear answers to these questions to do with Brexit, etc., and the European Union, until Sir Keir can offer clear answers to these questions and articulate a compelling vision of the country he wants to lead, Labour will struggle to make any headway. and Mr. Johnson will continue to ride his luck. Now, that is not at all surprising, that particular conclusion, but it's not really hitting the target. The target being that it's not just about the European Union or the Brexit that Keir Starmer fails on. Keir Starmer is politically dead on every issue that makes a society of the world come to life. So instead of saying a particular question, the Times editorial should say that Keir Starmer should be removed, as should Boris Johnson. But because the Times is itself in the depth of darkness and dead, politically dead, spiritually dead, ethically dead, it cannot say that. And it extends to all the other Fleet Street titles. The last 4 years' attack by DEFRA on the perfect embodiment of universal innocence and good health of baby angel Geronimo sums up the depth of justice in this country. And the justice can only die when the country is dead, politically dead, ethically dead, morally dead. And no article in the Times or in the rest of Fleet Street has come anywhere near recognizing that truth. So it is dark land. And the dark land cannot be ended. And light cannot be shown. And natural justice cannot be established unless this is recognized by enough people with courage and principle. As we said about the length of time, 800 years since the 1225 version of the Magna Carta, which the Supreme Court on the 17th of January 2017 quoted from. That length, 800 years, is nearly 30 generations. Too long? And the Little England mentality has been taking hold over the last 800 years. Now, there have been very minor, if you like, minor symbolic interruptions. One, the Wat Tyler, 1381, and the other is the Levelers, 200 years ago, in Manchester. What else? There is not much evidence that the darkness that was engulfing England has been even noticed by most people. The fact that they have noticed, the fact that they have not noticed is what constitutes evidence and proof and confirmation that Little England has been politically dying for centuries. And the fact that Gordon Brown, while on a short visit of Africa, while he was still in the post of Prime Minister, by default, because he was not elected, he just continued the remainder of the so-called mandate that was given by the voters while Tony Blair was still incumbent, 2005 election. So when Gordon Brown went to Africa, and he was asked a very minor question. It wasn't a major question at all. He was asked a question along the line that did he regret the British Empire? And he flatly refused to regret or express regret. Now that was Gordon Brown. That was Gordon Brown doing something that is contrary to what, even in symbolic terms, today's Times reports about the status or the standing of Brenda, otherwise known as Queen Elizabeth II, vis-a-vis the Black Lives Matter movement. The Times reports that the royal family is fully in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, compared to that, Gordon Brown was obviously in denial and still is in denial of all the implications of that symbolic statement, Black Lives Matter. Because as I said, evidentially and on the ground, Black Lives Matter only represents about 5% of what actually matters in the context of fighting racism, imperialism, and related issues. The fact that Gordon Brown is that behind, that far behind even than Brenda, because Brenda's royal family, so-called, has been repeatedly accused of being racist. And if Brenda's royal family can now get reported as supporting, that's the top of the page, news page. Royal insiders claims that Queen and her family are BLM supporters. Royal insider claims. So that means that when incumbent in the post of Prime Minister, Gordon Brown himself behaved as a racist. And racism is only one defect in the, quote, United Kingdom state. Because obviously, Gordon Brown's refusal to accept that the UK state owed apology for imperialism was based on advice he must have received. An advice coming from whatever number of sources, whatever numbers of parts of the UK state at the time when he made the racist standing in defiance of the evidence that imperialistic occupations and violations of other countries warranted apologies, at least in the least. In the UK state, which becomes indistinguishable from the conservatives vis-a-vis as opposed to Labour. Because the real decisions are made by people other than party political placemen and women. Most of these people are insidious, unidentifiable, not transparent, not held to account. And these are the people that transfer, unlike the USA, where the incoming president brings in new sets of people to kind of staff the incoming administration. The UK's Whitehall, so-called permanent kind of staff, are the ones that actually remain in place with only slight changes. So the structure remains the same, which is one reason why the political murderer of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, is actually rubber stamping and aping and colluding with Boris Johnson's narrative and agenda. And despite the fact that it's only private eye kind of doing a satirical take on the actual behavior, actual role of Keir Starmer, saying that there is nothing to oppose. This may be satirically written, but it's a reflection of the actual evidence of the truthful version of what Keir Starmer has been doing. So you look at all the kind of platforms and outlets in Fleet Street, and you look at the various occupants of the various so-called shadow positions in the so-called shadow cabinet fronted by Keir Starmer, and you look at the actual so-called independent commentators, both in the so-called media and in the academic fields, and there is nothing. There is absolutely no sign of opposition to any wrongdoings, any crimes being done by Boris Johnson-fronted cabal. And that is the actual truth, which is why the systematic serial crimes and criminal attacks on baby angel Geronimo could be mounted by the Boris Johnson-fronted cabal. Because they believe, factually, accurately, that they could do that without any opposition. And it's not just the right wing of the Labour Party, so-called, that has been politically murdered by Keir Starmer. It is all of it. All of it that constitutes the rubber stamping, colluding, unprincipled, immoral, unethical ramp that is supposed to be made up of the former Labour Party. Right, left, and center. They are all politically, spiritually, ethically dead. For example, there is a trendy kind of circuit going on today via Twitter, And you know there is a circuit going on when one of the youngest members of parliament, she's in her 20s still, Kurzara Sultana, gets on board with Owen Jones and expresses her disgust. That is opportunistic of Zara Sultana, not ethically, morally dedicated to upholding the principle for justice. This is the whole confusion about gender and transphobia and all that. And it's not the actual transphobia that is at the root of the banning by Keir Starmer of Young Labour's kind of annual shebang around the so-called Labour Party's annual conference. So what is happening with the political murder of the Labour Party by Keir Starmer? The ideological narrative is going to be kept in as much in the dark place as possible, no matter what happens cephalogically at the election whenever it is held. So no justice is going to be the kind of outcome. Justice is not a priority. Accountability is not heard of. Transparency is not heard of. So it's a dead darkness, dead dark place, either side. And while the Financial Times did acknowledge that Johnson has defied his small number of opposition kind of opponents inside the Conservative Party against the national insurance rise, etc. Today's Financial Times is running the piece that confidence is growing in recovery after the pandemic. But the Financial Times is contradicting itself in the following piece about UK's or Britain's plan to ditch European Union data rule on artificial intelligence decision making rings alarm bells. These are timid and politically absolutely dead kind of movements. So, when baby angel Geronimo was targeted for attack via and by and through DEFRA, baby angel Geronimo became, and he remains and he shall remain, the symbol of not just innocence, his innocence against all the evil that is going on in the DEFRA apparatus, but he's the symbol of innocence being denied rights and being targeted by evil forces in every part of the Little England dark land. So we shall be ending this particular edition here, and I shall continue on the same theme in the next edition, whether it's later today or tomorrow, Saturday.